Most people believe that when a major crisis hits, they lose their power of choice. We often feel like victims of circumstances, waiting for the waves of life to swallow us whole. But what if your greatest failure isn't the disaster itself, but your decision to let go of the wheel? Why do some people remain calm while the world crumbles around them, while others give up before the first drop of rain? The definitive answer to reclaiming your power when everything is lost is waiting for you at the very end of this journey. The year was 1892. The SS Atlantic Star, a massive iron-hulled steamship, was cutting through the grey, turbulent waters of the North Atlantic. On board was Julian, a man who had once been a titan of the cotton industry in Liverpool. Just 3 weeks prior, a series of failed investments and a sudden market collapse had stripped him of his warehouses, his ships, and his reputation. He was traveling to New York with nothing but a single trunk and a heart filled with the cold, heavy ash of bankruptcy. To Julian, this voyage was not a transition to a new life, but a slow funeral procession toward a city where he was a nobody. On the 4th night of the crossing, the sky turned the color of bruised plums. The wind, which had been a steady hum, transformed into a high-pitched shriek. The barometer in the captain's quarters dropped sharply. A massive storm system, born in the cold currents of the north, had collided with the ship's path. The Atlantic Star began to groan under the pressure of 20-foot waves. The iron plates of the hull vibrated with a low, bone-shaking resonance as the vessel tilted dangerously from side to side. Inside the first-class cabins, furniture slid across floors, and the sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the corridors. Julian did not seek shelter in the common areas with the other panicked passengers. Instead, he made his way to the upper deck. The rain was not falling. It was being driven horizontally, like millions of tiny needles. He stood near the stern, his hands gripping the wet, icy railing until his knuckles turned white. He watched the black abyss of the ocean, opening and closing beneath the ship. In his mind, the chaos of the storm matched the wreckage of his financial life. He felt that the universe was providing him with a convenient exit. If he were to disappear into that black water, no one would be able to say he had given up. They would simply say he was a victim of the sea. He climbed onto the lower rung of the railing, his boots slipping on the salt-slicked metal. The wind tried to push him back, but he leaned into the void. Just as he was preparing to let go, he noticed a faint, steady light coming from a small sheltered alcove near the secondary steering station. It was a hurricane lamp, swinging rhythmically with the ship's motion. Beside it sat an old man in a thick, oil-stained yellow slicker. It was Elias, one of the ship's most senior deck, a man whose skin looked like weathered leather. Elias was not looking at the waves. He was meticulously coiling a thick hawser rope. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he was sitting in a quiet garden on a Sunday afternoon. Julian stepped back down, confused by the sight of such mundane labor in the midst of a life-threatening gale. He moved toward the old man, shouting over the roar of the wind. "What are you doing? Don't you see the ship is sinking? The waves are higher than the deck." Elias didn't look up immediately. He finished the coil, secured it with a precise knot, and then finally raised his grey eyes to Julian. "The ship is not sinking yet, sir," Elias replied. His voice was calm and anchored. "The sea is doing what the sea has done for millions of years. It is being a sea. This storm is not a personal attack on us. It is simply the weather." Julian gestured wildly at the dark horizon. "Everything is out of control. Look at the water. We have no power over this." Elias stood up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. He pointed toward the heavy brass wheel of the secondary steering station, which was currently locked in place. "You are right, sir. We have no power over the Atlantic. We cannot tell the wind to stop or the waves to flatten. The storm belongs to the sea. That is the sea's business. But this wheel," he tapped the brass rim, "this wheel belongs to us. That is our business. If I spend my time fearing the waves, I forget to grease the gears. If the captain spends his time cursing the clouds, he forgets to read the compass." Elias picked up his lamp and looked Julian directly in the eyes. "Many men jump overboard, not because the ship is sinking, but because they have convinced themselves that the storm has already won inside their own heads. They mistake the sea's chaos for their own lack of will. But a sailor knows a secret. The storm can only drown you if it gets inside the hull, and it only gets inside if you stop steering." The old man then turned and walked toward the engine room hatch, leaving Julian alone, with the swinging lamp and the howling wind. Julian stood silent for a long time. He looked at the waves again. They were still massive, still terrifying, and still indifferent to his existence. But he realized that, for the past 3 weeks, he had allowed the storm of his bankruptcy to enter the hull of his soul. He had been so focused on the loss of his warehouses that he had abandoned the wheel of his own character. He saw now that his financial ruin was the sea's business, a cycle of the market, as natural and impersonal as a gale. But his response to it, that was his wheel. The ship took a particularly violent lurch, throwing Julian against the bulkhead. He didn't feel fear this time. He felt a sudden, sharp clarity. He scrambled toward the bridge, fighting against the tilt of the deck. He found the crew struggling to secure a heavy hatch that had come loose, threatening to flood the lower decks. Julian didn't ask for permission. He threw his weight against the iron lever, his expensive wool coat soaking up the salt water and grease. He worked alongside the sailors, his hands bleeding, his muscles screaming with a type of exertion he hadn't felt in decades. He wasn't a merchant anymore. He wasn't a bankrupt man. He was a human being with his hands on the wheel of the present moment. The SS Atlantic Star did not sink. When the sun finally rose over a bruised and exhausted ocean, Julian stood on the deck, watching the first light of New York Harbor in the distance. He had lost his fortune, yes, but he had realized that, as long as he held the wheel of his own choices, he was never truly bankrupt. The ship of choice is a reminder that we live in 2 worlds simultaneously: the world of the sea, which we cannot control, and the world of the helm, which is entirely ours. We waste our energy trying to negotiate with the storm, trying to find meaning in the chaos, when our only true task is to keep the ship upright and moving forward. Bankruptcy, illness, and loss are the sea's business. Resilience, integrity, and action are yours. My friend, do not let the storm outside get inside your hull. You may not be able to calm the ocean, but you are the absolute master of your own rudder. If you have been standing at the railing, ready to let go, I ask you to turn back. Find your wheel, grab it with both hands. The storm may continue, but the direction of your life is still in your hands. Plant a new seed of wisdom for your soul every day by subscribing to Seeds of Life. Together, we will navigate through any weather